What do these best-selling digital products on Etsy have in common? According to Listing View, this wedding stationery bundle is only 7 months old and has made 260 sales for a total revenue of $14,000. This 11-month-old social media template listing has made 362 sales for over $5,000 in revenue. And this Airbnb digital welcome book has made over $13,000 in revenue from 939 sales in months. What do they share? A solid visual identity. They feel cohesive, the colors make sense together, and the fonts don't feel random. Everything just looks intentional. And that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to show you how to think more like... dirty. I'm going to show you how to think a bit more like a professional graphic designer and create that same level of polish using something called a brand board. Hi, I'm Jai. I've been selling on Etsy for almost 2 years now, both digital products and print on demand, and I also have a bit of a background in graphic design. Well, 10 years to be exact. But I want to make one thing clear up front. You don't need to be a graphic designer to succeed on Etsy. In fact, a lot of successful sellers start with almost zero design experience. That said, if you do have an understanding of design, you have an advantage because you stop guessing what works and start making intentional decisions. And that is our goal for today. Now, before we get into making a brand board, let's just clarify some things real quick. What is a visual identity? Well, quite literally, these are the things that you can see, like your colors, your fonts, and your images. But branding is something entirely different and encompasses more than that. It includes the things that you don't see in a literal sense, like your customer service, your history, your values, and even the way you treat people who work for your company. And on Etsy, your products, or your digital products, or print-on-demand products, can have their own visual identity separate from your shop's branding. So one product can feel like it's more soft and feminine, and then another can feel more minimal and corporate. And then there's maybe another one that's more bold and playful. They all serve different people, and they don't need to look all the same. What matters is that each one feels cohesive on its own. So what is a brand board for? Well, at its core, it's basically a visual reference where you can define your colors, fonts, and images all in one place so that your design feels more consistent. But honestly, that definition doesn't really capture why this is so important, especially in the context of selling on Etsy. Because on Etsy, you're not just designing things to look nice. You're actually competing in a marketplace where people are scrolling fast and making split-second decisions. And they're judging your products based almost entirely on how it looks. And this is where most beginners get stuck. They'll maybe open up Canva, start designing by picking a random color, then maybe switch it halfway, and then try a font, and then another font that feels like it looks good to them, and then add some graphics here and there. And by the end of everything, sure, maybe technically they have a template that works, but it might not feel cohesive. And it feels a bit off, and your customers can actually feel that too, even if they can't explain why. So a brand board would fix that. It forces you to make these decisions once and upfront so that when you're actually designing your product, you're not guessing anymore. You're just executing. And the result is that your product starts to feel more intentional, more polished, and even more expensive, which you can actually charge more for. And here's another way that you can use this that I think is even more powerful. You can use brand boards to deconstruct best-selling products. Not copy them, but to study them. So instead of looking at a bestseller and thinking, okay, I'll just copy this, you get to zoom out and break it down and start noticing some patterns. And a lot of these products actually follow very specific design rules, but they're just packaged differently. That's the difference between copying and understanding. Copying might keep you stuck, but understanding actually lets you create your own products that still feel like they belong in that same level of quality. So the goal of a brand board isn't to box you in creatively, but to give you a system so that whatever you actually create looks like it belongs together and competes with the products that are already doing well on Etsy. Now, with that out of the way, let's build a brand board with the help of Kittl, which has become one of the most important non-negotiable tools that I use whenever I'm designing digital products and print-on-demand products. So there are 5 different parts to a brand board. Well, there could be more, but let's just stick to 5 for now. And the first one is, of course, your logo. Now, this one is pretty simple. If you're creating a brand board for your shop, then yes, you could put your logo in your brand board. But if you're selling digital products, especially templates, and those specifically for businesses, you don't actually need to put one. This is because people would, of course, want to customize a product and make it their own. So if you put your shop's logo in the template, that would be kind of weird, and it might actually even lower the value of the digital product. So most of the time, you can either just leave it out or use a placeholder, like an empty square, for example. So in our brand board, I'm just gonna type in here a placeholder, my logo, and let's just center that. Pretty simple. Let's move on to the next part, which is your colors. Colors do a lot of heavy lifting in your design. They set the tone immediately. And even before someone reads anything or knows what your product is specifically, they already have a feeling about your product based on the colors alone. And you've probably heard about color psychology, like blue is for peace, red is for love, and green is for nature and health. Knowing that stuff can help you choose colors, but honestly, what matters more than that is actually how your colors work together. And a simple structure for choosing your colors is, first, you can choose 1 to 3 main colors, and this would serve as the main personality of your design. And then you can choose 2 to 3 neutrals. Now, this would be your black, white, maybe even beige or navy blue. And this would balance out the design and give it more breathing room. Now, in our brand board, I'm just gonna create some circles for our colors. These 3 will be our main colors, and these 3 will be our neutrals. So one strategy for choosing colors is going a bit into color theory. And we do this by going into the color wheel. Now, first, we have our complementary colors, and these are colors that are opposite to each other. So for example, we have orange and blue, we have purple and yellow, and red and green. And then we have our analogous colors, which are 2 to 4 colors side by side. So for example, that's the red, orange, and lighter orange, or the green, turquoise, and blue. Those are considered your analogous color scheme. And then we have monochrome, which is just one color but different shades. So let's go, for example, with this red, we have the bright red, the pastel red, and somewhat pink shade of red. That is monochrome. For today, let's just stick with a monochromatic color palette, and I'm gonna go with a lime green. I'm gonna have this main lime green, and then a darker shade of that, and a lighter shade of that. Then for our neutrals, let's stick with the basics, just white, black, and maybe a gray. Now, if you're feeling stuck with choosing colors, there's actually a simple hack that I like to do. I actually just like to go to Google and search for something like a spring color palette. And I like using images that look like this, where we have a reference image, and then it sort of picks colors from that image to give us a palette. That is a super easy way to not overthink color selection. You can just look for these types of images and then copy that into your brand board. But for now, we're just gonna stick with our monochromatic green. I'm just gonna label this main colors and our neutrals. Now for the next section, we move on to the fonts. And fonts can completely change how your design would feel. Like you could use the exact same colors as another product, but if you change the font, the whole vibe can completely shift. A good way to structure this is just to choose 2 to 3 fonts with clear roles. First, you have your heading or your primary font. Then you have your body or secondary font. And then you have your accent. Now, your heading would be the personality of the design, and it would be the most eye catching font of your design. And this would be used for stuff like your titles, your main bullet points. So for our heading, I'm just gonna choose a bold sans serif. Kittl has a lot of fonts here that you could choose, and you don't have to overthink it because they are curated. So for our heading, I'm just gonna go with Proxima Nova in bold. And then you have your body font, which would be your workhorse, and it needs to be easy to read because this would take up the bulk of your copy in the design. And by copy, I mean your boxes of text. Like, for example, in a newspaper, right, you have your headline and then you have the article itself. The body font is what you use for the actual content of the article. You should use a sans serif or a serif font for this. For our body, I'm gonna use the same Proxima Nova but in regular. Let's actually label that. Proxima Nova regular and Proxima Nova bold. And then you have your accent font, which would add a bit more character to your design. And this should just take up small amounts of space. Usually on Etsy, one of the most popular fonts for accent fonts is the Britney font. So it's this girly cursive font. But if you want to stand out, there's a whole world out there that isn't just the Britney font. Okay, you could use italics, for example, as accent fonts. For an accent font, I want to choose something cursive. So let's try to look for something like that. Let's look for something that's more handwritten, but also cursive. I want to go with this one. It is called Hillbear. All right, that will serve as our accent. And again, just stick to 2 to 3 fonts. If you go beyond that, things can start to feel a bit more messy unless you really know what you're doing. Usually, when a design has 4 or more fonts, it's more of the artistic types of graphic design products like posters. So, yes, just stick to 2 to 3 fonts. But even the most professional graphic designers, they can get away with just one font family. And by that, I mean, like, for example, the Helvetica font. They could just use the bold version, the regular version, and the light version. And that would make up the whole font structure for their design. Next, we have your imagery and graphics. And I'm grouping these together because the principle is kind of the same. Whether you're using photos or graphics in your design, the key here is consistency. Now, when it comes to photos, you have to ask, like, what's the color tone? Is it more warm, cool, muted, or vibrant? What is the lighting like? Is it more dark and mysterious, or is it like bright and happy? And what is the overall mood of the photo? I have some examples here of these family and engagement shoots. Now, as you can see, this set here has more browns and sepia tones to them. And this image here is more saturated and bright. So if you would put this in this group of photos, it doesn't really belong. And that's what I mean by having visual consistency. Because if you mix in this sort of image in your design, it would actually make it look more cheap. And the same goes for graphics. Like, are they doodle style or are they more clean and vector-like? Do they have thick outlines or thin lines? Or do they even have lines at all? These are all stuff that matters. For example, we have bachelorette graphics here. This one is more of a doodle style, and this one is more of the blocky vector style. So as much as possible, use just one style for your entire product. And I know that sometimes finding matching graphics can be kind of tricky. You have to look through all these stock photos or stock graphics to make them match. But fortunately for Kittl, you can actually just generate these types of graphics within your artboard without having to go through hundreds and hundreds of graphics. Having consistency in your images and graphics is actually the easiest way to make your product look more premium. So just pick one style and commit to that. For our brand board, I'm gonna go here to illustrations and I'm gonna add some masks. And these would act as placeholders for our images. And then now here on photos, I'm gonna select the photos that I would want to use for this brand board. I'm just gonna drag it here and make it fit the mask. Just to show you an example of visual consistency, I'm gonna choose the vector style of graphic. So we have clean lines here. Also, the corners are rounded. And I'm just gonna place a few to show what it looks like for graphics to be sort of uniform. And for our imagery, I chose these photos with more neutral color grading and low contrast. Now, finally, we have our last section, which are the textures and patterns. This is more of a bonus layer, but it adds a lot of character to your design, and it can make it feel more trendy. For example, on Etsy right now, what's huge are stripes, checkers, and the grunge texture. So you can incorporate these to keep up with the times, but you don't want your textures to be fighting with your main content. They should actually just support the design and not overpower it. For this brand board, I'm gonna go with checkers. And there we have a super simple, super quick brand board that we made in about 10 minutes. And if you actually noticed, this is based on one of the products that I showed a while ago. It is actually based on the social media template bundle. And this is what I've been talking about, how to reference bestsellers on Etsy and how to deconstruct them. Because we've learned a lot of things from this template. First of all, you have the colors, right? So the color here, the main color is a lime green. And while green usually represents health and nature, this one was paired with a more bold and blocky font, which changed the vibe entirely to something more energetic and eccentric and modern, and maybe even techie. And with this accent font of this marker kind of handwritten font, it breaks apart the monotony and makes it more fun. Then we have the images with a neutral color grading. Even the clothing is subdued and neutral, but the people give off this girl boss kind of vibe, but it's not too girly that it would alienate maybe a male audience who might be interested in this type of template as well. And then we have the checkers pattern, which are really trendy to let us know that this brand is up with the times. All in all, we have a visual identity that is energetic, edgy, maybe for a business that is in the tech or consultancy space. And there is a specific audience for it, but it's not super niche down that it alienates too many people. And that is why and how it has become a best-selling product. And that's basically your brand board. Once you have this, designing becomes so much easier because you don't have to start from scratch every time. You don't have to keep on guessing, and most importantly, your products feel more consistent and intentional, which makes it look more valuable. So if you have a product that's doing well, you can actually use this brand board to expand into other products without losing that same look and feel. For example, let's take this visual identity that we just referenced and apply it to one of Kittl's templates. Kittl has so many templates that you can use for almost every purpose, whether that's creating a shop banner, listing infographics, media kits, and so much more. By the way, I made this brand board with these notes as a shareable template that you can use. And it's free, it's on Kittl, and you don't need a paid account to access it. But if you do end up liking your experience on Kittl and want to explore more of its features, like generating images, generating videos, vectorizing images, removing backgrounds, and all that fun stuff, you can use my code JYT for 25% off your first Kittl subscription, whether that's a monthly subscription or a yearly subscription. So yeah, if you found this video helpful, please give this video a like. It helps the algorithm push this video to more people who might like it or learn from it. And please subscribe if you haven't yet. I'm trying to be more intentional with the videos that I want to create moving forward. And I've noticed that there aren't that many advanced graphic design strategies paired with the context of selling on Etsy. So I feel like I want to do more of that. So please leave a comment below if you're interested in seeing that kind of stuff. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.